Hi. I finished playing The Last of Us 2 today, and I can't stop thinking about it. As a longtime fan of The Last of Us 1, this game has disappointed me to an incredible extent, and I need to talk about it. I just can't keep it inside. So, here we go. I will talk about my complaints with the game, roughly chronologically, which means that we will start off at the end of the first game. The ending of the first game is sacred to a lot of players of The Last of Us. Even to this day, 7 years later, there are still debates going on about whether or not Joel made the right choice. Its strength lays in the fact that it remained unexplored, even though there was so much to discuss. Yet, Neil Druckmann has decided to take this ending and expose everything it means. He wanted to totally dismantle it, and that's what he did. The fact that actions have consequences is nothing new in the universe of The Last of Us, and we explore these consequences in two ways. The first one is when Joel tells Ellie what he did. Ellie is obviously very upset with him. Yet, even though Cuckman wanted to explore every nook and cranny it seemed like, he failed to show us the complexity of that ending and that choice and all its layers and context. Ellie's death would be certain, but if they were actually going to be able to develop a cure, was not. Yet, in The Last of Us 2, no one discussed this part of Joel's choice. And in the end, we learn through a final flashback that Ellie was willing to try to forgive Joel for his actions. That the consequences of this very important moment in both of their lives has been left so underdeveloped and so poorly written hurts my soul. It is plot holes like these that take me out of the story. Another more important consequence of Joel's actions is that the daughter of the surgeon he killed decided to take revenge and come after him. At that point, it had been 5 years when Abby travels to Jackson. This undoubtedly will become one of the most infamous moments in gaming history ever. A lot of people who defend this game seem to have failed to notice that longtime fans of The Last of Us aren't necessarily angry that Joel died. It is how he died and why he died. That Joel would not have been this trusting could be up for debate, since he also said his first name when he met Henry and Sam. He trusted Henry and Sam because they also had a kid with them, for example. Another aspect is that because he was tortured to death, the one who executed this, the quote-unquote antagonist, Abby, is immediately perceived as a villain without morals. This is strengthened by the fact that Joel saved her life mere moments ago. On top of that, the reason why she does this does not seem to fit in the world of the first Last of Us game. Survival had become a luxury. To quote Ellie from the first game, where are anyone's parents? It had become a normality that you lost part of your family, both to zombies or infected and to humans. And it is this exact sentiment that does not seem to be respected when Abby decides to go on a quest to kill the man who killed her father. Again, it is strengthened when we compare Joel's line of reasoning with hers. Joel killed Abby's dad to save Ellie, while Abby killed Joel only because of revenge. And the final insulting nail in the coffin is that this is what sparks Ellie to go on her revenge quest, which makes her lose everything. On top of that, the player is supposed to sympathize with Abby later on, but before we discuss this, I want to turn towards Ellie as a character now. The Ellie we see in the second game is not the Ellie we knew from the first game. She's more brooding and closed off, and we know why. Because we saw in the flashbacks that Joel told her what really happened with the fireflies, and it broke her heart. I find it a little bit of a bummer that we didn't get to explore this part of their relationship. How she felt at first and how her feelings towards Joel and the situation changed over time. This new personality is intensified when Joel dies. Ellie used to be curious, optimistic, but not afraid to speak her mind or insult you. This Ellie has lost all of these traits except the insulting one. It also made her relationship with Joel very awkward, understandable, but as a longtime fan of The Last of Us, I was longing for a father-daughter bonding moment. We eventually got this through a flashback, but it always had a sad undertone. It doesn't feel good at all. When we finally get to play as Ellie, we meet a character named Jessie, who is the embodiment of underdevelopment. Except from the fact that he is nice, I can't give you anything about his personality. They talk about kissing and relationships, so the player gets the feeling that Jackson has evolved in this prosperous place where there is room for these types of things. We can also see it by the people outside, the fairy lights, the pubs or inns. When walking around in Jackson, I genuinely felt good. I think that a great example of how luxurious their life has become is the quote unquote bigot. We know, and we will also see in a flashback later on, that Ellie kissed Dina on a party, and there was a man that called them a dyke. Joel shoved that man. Ellie told him that she doesn't need his protection anymore. And I want to pause in this moment for a while. This establishes two things. First of all, Ellie's relationship with Joel. Joel had just told Ellie the truth, and Ellie has felt very antagonistic towards him. But also later on, when the man told Ellie that he had a little bit too much to drink, that he apologizes and that he made her some sandwiches, Ellie rejects this apology. By the end of the game, Ellie is willing to forgive Abby for killing her literal surrogate father in a very, very horrible way. Yet she is not willing to forgive a random man that called her a dyke. She clearly thinks that calling someone a dyke is a very immoral thing to do, not worthy of forgiveness at all. But torturing someone to death, that's worthy of forgiveness. It might also be a scene that was included to please a small group of people who want to see this kind of stuff in games. And again, this establishes that Jackson has become very luxurious and prosperous because there is finally room again to be a bigot. Not everything has to be about surviving in a post-apocalyptic world anymore. Unfortunately, while one may argue that Ellie's new personality is logical and deserved, it brings a lot of negative aspects with it. The biggest example, in my opinion, is her relationship with Dina. Now, Dina is also quite underdeveloped. I know that she is loyal, that she is nice, that she is pregnant. That's not a personality trait. Let me think. She likes lame jokes. Is being Jewish a personality trait? No, that's a religion. Having stray cats, not a personality trait. She is loyal and she is nice. Whoa, we are really breaking ground here with this next gen character writing. I think that her personality shines the most when Ellie and Dina are in an area with spores and Ellie's mask breaks. Dina panics and even suggests that they share her mask, but Ellie stops her and tells her that she is immune. Later on in the theater they discuss this, and for some reason this is very hard to believe for Dina. I am guessing that there is some kind of backstory as to why this is so difficult to believe, but we don't get to see this. On top of that, Dina reveals that she is pregnant, and as a response, Ellie calls her a burden. I don't know if this is supposed to be ironic, but it is, since Dina saved Ellie's life multiple times. I found this scene very compelling, but also very telling about who Ellie had become as a person. Later they make up, but it doesn't feel as compelling as it did in The Last of Us 1. The reason being that Joel and Ellie back then were very fleshed out, complex characters. They didn't need to say everything they wanted to say for us, the player, to understand what they meant. With Ellie and Dina, we aren't quite there yet, so it is very hard for us to know what they are thinking and feeling when they are having a deeper conversation. This also makes their fight seem less significant to us, yet it is a nice moment. Other nice moments where Ellie's personality seems more happy are in the weed basement where they are having sex and when Ellie plays her cover of Take On Me. My main issue, especially with the cover of Take On Me, lies in dialogue that is written oftentimes to be rather unbelievable. It's just ever so slightly melodramatic, while we are used to dialogue from The Last of Us 1 that was very grounded and real. The pacing of the story also rather hinders our view of their relationship. For some reason, we only get to see the awkward beginning and the honeymoon phase. Before Ellie sets off to Seattle, we learn that she kissed Dina during that party, but she is saying that it is nothing and that they are not in a relationship. Then we have the scene in the weed basement, which is rather cute, but doesn't give us any notion about their feelings towards each other, only that there are feelings. Then we skip a couple of weeks and they seem to have totally fallen for each other. They are right now in a relationship and they call each other babe. They say stuff like, fuck you, I love you too. Yet, because we did not see that crucial period where their relationship builds up, it is hard for the player to relate to this relationship and to root for them as a couple. When you're immediately thrown in a dynamic where two characters are head over heels for each other and you don't really know why they are compatible, it can feel a lot as if you are standing on the sideline instead of being fully immersed into your character's thoughts and feelings. The pacing of the game once they're in Seattle does not help this at all. Joel had just died, and as a player, we do not get anything to hold on to that would further the plot. Instead, we get this semi-open world where especially Dina tells a lot of fun facts about her past. This genuinely feels contrived, as we don't really care about her past because we still don't really know who she is as a person. And it also feels very hollow because it doesn't add anything to further the plot. Why am I saying plot so weird with such a thick T? Plot. 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 That's also weird. God damn it. While the graphics are absolutely beautiful and stunning, that entire area felt boring. There seemed to be nothing to do apart from collecting parts and pills, and the gameplay in itself is not enough to keep the player engaged. Speaking of gameplay, I would say it is good, definitely not bad, but I don't think that this is the main aspect of why people would want to pick up this game. It is the same as in The Last of Us and can carry us through all these beautiful worlds. It is very streamlined compared to its predecessor, it's more brutal. The areas where you encounter infected or enemy humans are bigger and way more open. They feel very immersive and real. And as a player, I always felt that there are multiple paths to get to my target and I happen to choose one of them. Maybe this isn't the case, but I like having this feeling. As if I'm actually exploring a space rather than going through a very long hallway. The puzzle segments are nothing to write home about, but they also aren't bad either. But I want to emphasize how beautiful this game is. The quality of the graphics have been unlike anything I have seen before. Speaking of the place where we are, one thing that really annoyed me is a small segment that I'm going to play now.
What the hell happened out here? I'm guessing the military bombed the shit out of this place.
Why would they do that?
Well, they would sometimes destroy parts of the city that were lost to the infected. Or to rebels.
That seems like overkill.
Well, it usually worked.
On the infected or the rebels?
Both.
Shit.
So what happened here? They bombed the hell out of the surrounding areas to the quarantine zones, hoping to kill as much of the infected as possible. It worked. For a little while.
I genuinely don't understand the choice to pick this morally grey military group and make them just evil. Later on, we find them in a truck, and on the truck someone wrote fascists, which is laying it on pretty thickly that these are evil people. This seems to conflict with the philosophy of the first game, where no one is truly good anymore, but no one is truly evil either. Everyone just seems to try their best to get by, and everybody is making very, very big mistakes in the meantime. It is this moral ambiguity that was delivered so powerful in the first game that seemed to be completely missing in the second one. Characters' morals and values come across as very random. A good example that I already gave was Ellie not forgiving the bigot, but forgiving Abby. Another one is how Dina, who is very, very sick, refuses to go back to Jackson with Jesse because she doesn't want to leave Ellie. Or how Abby thinks that torturing a man to death is a just punishment for someone who killed somebody else to save the life of someone he cares about dearly, even though she herself kills dozens of people as her job. It is these things that make characters feel very disconnected and unbelievable. Another great example of this is Tommy, Joel's brother. In the first game, Joel brings Ellie to him and explains that Ellie is in fact immune and might be the cure for humanity. Yet Tommy refuses to take her to the Fireflies because he has a wife now and people to take care of in Jackson. In the second game, these morals are thrown out of the window in favor of an emotional decision to leave in the middle of the night to take revenge. A last one that I wanted to talk about is when Ellie and Dina see a guy who had a single gunshot wound in the throat, without the usual blood and gore that we have come to expect. And when they see his corpse, they're definitely disgusted by it. And this strikes me as odd because both of them, or at least Ellie, has killed way more people in very brutal ways. For example, David in the first game, Ellie whacked at his face with a machete. It is because of this lack of cohesiveness when it comes to the characters that I actually find the parts where we are just fighting zombies way more enjoyable. The sets and the graphics can truly come to life here. The best example I can find is in the tunnel with the red lights. This is also when pacing was done very well. There is a new type of zombie called Shambler and he is introduced very well. We catch a quick glimpse of this beast and we see a dead wolf whose life has clearly come to an end in a horrible way. I felt excited and I felt a rush going through me because I knew I had to fight it. Another moment that I absolutely loved was the flashback where Joel took Ellie to the museum about dinosaurs and space. As a longtime fan, I loved seeing them happy together, and their banter actually brought tears to my eyes. This is because of the sad undertone, because this flashback is of something that we could never have again. Joel is dead and Ellie is an asshole. But we also saw other things that we will never see again. Good dialogue, for example, and good environmental storytelling. When Ellie goes into one of the abandoned buildings, somebody has been writing on the walls, and what he or she wrote was very haunting. We hear a sound and we think it's this person, but it turns out to be an animal. This entire very tiny subplot is only told through the environment, yet it was very well executed, and it is something that we will never see again in this game. I will skip around a little bit because the game is so boring by this point, but I think a very memorable moment for a lot of players was when we got introduced to dogs. Now, I personally might just be cold-hearted, but I never minded killing dogs in self-defense in games. I've always found killing dogs being equally evil as killing humans, but I can see how for a lot of players this was where they draw the line. I too had conflicted feelings when I killed my first dog because they're one of my favorite breeds of dogs and they're so fluffy and cute. But at this point I was completely disconnected from Ellie and her reasoning and I just wanted it to be over. Yet I wanted to pause here because this symbolizes doing something that you do not agree with because your character is doing so. Again, this is strengthened by the fact that you actually cannot skip this. Or maybe I'm just not competent enough. For about an hour I avoided killing the dog and the people he was accompanying, but to no avail. I am convinced that this is scripted and you are supposed to actually kill this dog. Theoretically, this fits in perfect with the entire theme of the game, which is how far you will go to feed an obsession, and in Ellie's case it's revenge. It is not something new, it has been explored, for example in Breaking Bad it was done very well. The big difference is, without any spoilers, that Breaking Bad, they cross the lines of the viewers very slowly. You aren't immediately confronted with something immoral Walter would do. This is because his character and reasoning have been presented to us to a T in such a manner that we are convinced that at the end of the day he just does what he has to do because he wants to do good. Ellie never does this, which is why it is so hard for us to connect to her in the first place, but also to support her actions. By the time we were supposed to kill this dog, we did not agree with her quest for vengeance. Or maybe a couple of people. In my experience, I have noted that players who think that killing of Joel is the most unacceptable thing to do in this game are also the ones who think that Ellie is incredibly righteous in her quest for vengeance. I personally do think that Joel could have died, and it could have been a very good plot point. It is just that this was not the case, as I have discussed earlier on. Another example of this is when Ellie tortures Nora to get the information she needs to find Abby. This is where we see that Ellie has regrets about the things that she is doing. Not that it is stopping her, but at least she does feel these things. Which makes it even more regrettable that at that point, as a player, I could not connect with her anymore. I think that this scene would have been impactful if I gave a shit. This is amplified by the fact that NPCs yell out the names of their dying comrades. While immersive, brutal and even gut-wrenching, Ellie comes across as even more obsessed and merciless. Another factor is that when Ellie and Jesse meet up again, they decided to go after Tommy instead of getting their revenge. Because of the amazing performance of the voice actors, the graphics and the amazing facial animations, we could see that Ellie did not want to go and save Tommy from the get-go. She really just wanted to get her revenge and kill Abby. Again, I have seen multiple players that are totally fine with getting revenge on Abby, but in my opinion this is shallow and petty, because of reasons I have talked about throughout this entire video. Ellie's part ends when she ends up killing Mel and Owen in the aquarium and killing their dog Alice. I've always found pregnancy to be such a weird choice in this game. Why is this where we draw the line at the end of her story? Why is killing a pregnant woman in self-defense considered to be worse than torturing somebody until they will give you the location of their friend? If the answer happens to be that this is because her girlfriend Dina is pregnant as well, then this would mean that Ellie's regret and her disgust with herself is because she recognizes her own girlfriend in Mel, rather than recognizing the horrible acts she has committed during this entire journey. At least she's empathizing with the situation she is in. But we can't stop ignoring the elephant in the room here. Where Ellie's part of the game made me feel uninterested, Abby's part of the game made me feel conflicted, and that's putting it lightly. Obviously, you don't know me, so this probably won't mean much to you, but when we switched to Abby's part, I started crying out of pure frustration. After playing through the entire game, and especially after her section, it becomes apparent that this game is made to make its players feel bad. To me, it feels like they killed off one of our all-time favorite characters in a horrible way. They made us sympathize with his killer. I am inclined to believe that whoever came up with this plot point feels mean-spirited towards fans of The Last of Us. I have noticed that people who didn't particularly like the first Last of Us game or just didn't care about it, didn't have a hard time adapting to this new way we're supposed to feel and think about Abby. It is very apparent that we have to like Abby. The opening sequence of Abby's story is what I have been taught the pet a dog moment. Usually in the beginning of a movie or a book or a game, you would want to have your protagonist do something that we can all agree with and empathize with. John Wick is an amazing example of this type of beginning. I feel like the moments we have with him and his puppy is one of the most powerful beginnings I have ever seen. On top of that, he also goes on a revenge quest, but every aspect of the writing in that movie has been done better than in The Last of Us 2. A very cool twist on this has been done in the beginning of House of Cards. Ellie also pets a dog in the beginning of the game actually. In Abby's case, we get multiple of these instances. She saves a zebra while having fun banter with her dad. She plays with a dog, she actually does it twice. A lot of NPCs greet her when we walk past them. She has friends that she can joke with, and she doesn't even want to cut in line while, for some reason, she was able to. This could potentially work for an opening of another protagonist that the developers want us to like. The only problem is that this is not our first impression of her. She already tortured Joel to death, and we saw the consequences of that choice that she made. The difference between her torturing a random guy to death and her torturing Joel to death is that Joel has been established for an entire game as someone that we as a player should love. And it has been done so well that the overwhelming majority of us really fell in love with him. Having someone somewhere in that world kill a guy because he killed your dad is probably excusable. It is the act of presenting this action to us involving a main character that we all love that seems to be such a weird choice. Why would you want to focus on this person specifically when you created your story? It baffles me, to be quite frank. Even though I don't feel as vengeful towards her as the average player, playing as her and her sections of the game feel as a very toxic version of emotional manipulation. Now, we constantly get emotionally manipulated by the media we consume. The pet the dog moment is a perfect example of that. You want to show your characters in a good light so that we as viewers and players love them. We also want to believe that what we are presented is the truth and it makes sense. In part, we consume media because we like to empathize with these kinds of people. Yet it becomes very hard to empathize with her when our first impression of her was a horrible one. Making such a mental jump and suddenly forcing yourself to like her or even love her is something I could not do. As a result, the entire section, I constantly wish I was playing as someone else. But does not help that, just like many other characters in this game, her personality does not get developed at all. If I were to describe her very seriously, I would say that she would be a psychopath who is afraid of heights. Her entire choice to kill Joel shapes who she is so much, but it also seems to conflict with other things that we see from her. Most notably, 5 years ago, when she overheard her dad and Marlene talking about killing Ellie to make a cure, she immediately says that she would sacrifice herself if it were up to her. Well, I'm glad that Abby got to express what her opinion about this ordeal is. I wish they would wake up Ellie so she could do the same. This installment clearly was here to show us that she is honorable, but also that she was involved in the entire ordeal. When she sees her dead father lying on the floor, the impact of the scene is muffled by the fact that we know that she tortured Ellie's father figure to death in a way more cruel fashion for a less honorable reason. The leaps in logic that we would have to make sense of this all are very big, and it is only logical that we fail. This is despite all these cute moments thrown at us, Abby still seems like a psychopath torture murderer. What doesn't help is that a large chunk of her part of the story feels like filler or just straight up boring. It is hard to know what the point was of a lot of sections, except from the fact that we have to like her now. Yet the writers made her do stuff like reacting passive aggressively when Mel, her friend, says that she doesn't feel good about torturing Joel. This only drives a bigger wedge between the player and Abby. The flashbacks contribute nothing of substance. At best, they are cheesy, and we get hit on the head with parallels between her and Ellie. For example, Dina, Ellie's girlfriend, is pregnant, and Mel, Abby's best friend, is pregnant. Ellie and Joel go on a cute, wholesome trip. Abby and Owen go on a cute, wholesome trip. They even have both Ellie and Abby jump into the water at the beginning of these flashbacks. I guess it is now time to give credit where credit is due. I think that Lev and Yara and their story was written very well. The change in quality is apparent. We meet these characters when Abby gets captured by the enemy and almost died. Coincidentally, they meet and they save each other's life, and we learn more about Lev and Yara's backstory. They ran away from the cult that Abby and the wolves have been fighting for years now. I find this really interesting. We finally get a little bit of the world building and the cultures. It's just too bad that there is an enormous wall that stands between me and getting immersed in the story. Just like there was some kind of layer of sadness when we played as Ellie and Joel during the flashbacks, there also was some kind of sadness when I played through this part of the game. I wanted to like everything about it, not everything except from the main protagonist and the fact that this actually doesn't contribute to the overarching plot. Let's jump from one unpopular opinion to the other. I didn't hate the sex scene as much as everybody else did. I hated it 9.5 out of 10. Like a critic that would want to praise a very bad game but also wants to look like they are somewhat trustworthy. Let's unpack this scene, shall we? When I rewatched this scene on YouTube, because I am a masochist, I read the comments and most of them said that this was not tasteful or that this did not turn them on at all. Obviously these are just YouTube comments, but so I like to think that they give a picture of the general sentiment of the public. My main question is why? In the sense that I'm going to assume that this was set there to establish some kind of bonding between the two characters, but also show us the very layered personalities of our characters. But I don't really know what aspect of their personality they try to highlight. They have sex immediately after Owen talks about how Abby tortured and killed Joel. Both of them come across as actual psychopaths at this point. I would also like to make the side note that here Owen was cheating on his pregnant girlfriend with one of their best friends. If any developer or writer wanted us to feel good about this scene, they missed the mark with a long shot. I've never hated Abby as much as I did during this scene. The only moment that topped this is the obvious one in the beginning. In conclusion, this sex scene showed me that both Owen and Abby are horrible fucking people. It's just too bad that in the same section the contrast with Lev is so big. One of the most memorable examples is his philosophy about fear. The guy comes across as genuinely smart. On top of that, he comes from a cult that is very interesting to explore. They're not allowed to touch things from the old world, but he also doesn't know a lot of contemporary words, like cool or punk rock. On top of that, Lev and Yara ran away from their cult because Lev is a transgender. I wish we could explore the values and rules of his cult more. I find his plot to be truly compelling, especially when his mom gets thrown in the mix. Yara tells Abby that his mom would rather kill her own son than accept this. But this does not stop Lev, and he goes out and searches for her. We go after him, and when we find him in his home, his mom has cut him multiple times, and in self-defense he killed her. His story has been more interesting so far than the entire game. I find these types of stories and emotions way more interesting to explore than whatever Abby has been doing. But I think I have said that enough by now. Going back to Ellie's story, a point that has been discussed a lot is how the structure of the game is very weird. We play as Ellie for 3 days, and in that period of time, we start and almost complete her entire story arc. Then we start over with a new character and have to do the same. A more classic approach that has been used more often and that uses multiple points of views would have been much better in my opinion. We would follow both Abby and Ellie's story as it leads up to their eventual meeting. I think that this would have been more engaging and more exciting. Instead, now we feel like we have to start over halfway through the game. I am guessing that they wanted us to feel bad for the side characters in Abby's part of the game, because most of them die and we already know this, but because of the reasons mentioned before, it did not have the intended effect on me. After feeling disgusted with myself for about 7 hours, the subplot of Lev and Yara ends when Isaac, the leader of the wolves, who also has been underdeveloped, infiltrates the islands of the Sephiroths or the Scars. A very wounded Yara kills Isaac to defend her brother. And I was very intensely thinking, why couldn't Joel get the same type of death as Yara did? Nevertheless, after I tried to push these emotions away, I could at least acknowledge that this subplot has been done quite well. I want to give my compliments to the team that worked on the graphics for this game. The island of the Scars looked absolutely beautiful, especially when it was on fire. We now land at the first fake final of the game, where playing as Abby we have to fight Ellie. I have come to the conclusion that everybody who played and loved the first game hated this segment, including myself. Fighting Abby felt like fighting with my own daughter, even though she has been such an asshole the entire game. The fact that making players feel uncomfortable was the goal from the start makes whoever made the decision come across as not a good person, to be quite honest with you. But we do fight her, and Abby takes the high ground here. She spares Ellie and Dina's life only because Dina is pregnant. Just like I did with Ellie, I'll assume that Abby did this because Dina reminded her of Mel. And just with Ellie, I'll assume that she only did this because she could relate to the situation. Yet, this feels more like a punch in the stomach, pun intended, than if both Abby or Ellie would win. Being at the mercy of the person that I have been hating this entire game feels bad. This feeling strengthens significantly when we enter the second fake ending. Ellie and Dina live happily on a farm and they have a son called JJ, and it feels very undeserved. And this is because they subverted our expectations significantly. Good job, guys. Usually you got the happy ending because you worked to deserve it. Here we get our happy ending because our enemy allows us to have one. On top of that, there is no visible character art that has taken part for our protagonist Ellie, and nothing feels like a chapter that we can close up finally. This is why this is not the ending. Before I move on, I will say that despite the fact that we got this because of Abby's mercy, I enjoyed walking around as Ellie, finally leading a normal life. It looks beautiful, and tiny moments like herding sheep or carving in a tree warmed my heart for the first time since I started playing. This is why Tommy's visit feels like a punch in the face. First of all, as discussed before, the Tommy of the first game would never go after someone for revenge years later. And I think that I speak for the majority of us when I say that I just wanted it to be over. Dina tries to stop Ellie, and I agree with her, but Ellie goes anyways. Before moving to the next section, I quickly want to touch upon the PTSD that both Ellie and Abby have at this point. While we can emphasize with Ellie's PTSD because we have a strong connection with both her and Joel. Abby's PTSD almost feels like it is blaming the player for choices that Joel made in the first game. I don't know if this was intentional, and I don't know if I am the only one who experienced it that way, but her PTSD seemed to be used to blame us for our actions yet again. Next, we switch perspectives to Abby again, and she's looking for the fireflies. We encounter a group that is the epitome of unbelievable writing. It seems like it is their job to torture people, with seemingly no explanation as to why they are doing this. While they seem very similar to the group of cannibals in the first Last of Us game, the contrast could not be bigger. It could be argued and also refuted that they were cannibals because food was sparse, which makes sense in a post-apocalyptic world. Here they seem to have the luxury to torture people as a full-time job. In terms of how much luxury there is compared to the previous game, we have come full circle, haven't we? We even went from a good luxurious place to a bad luxurious place. The big difference is that this last group of weird torture people is not believable at all. Abby gets captured by these people and we switch perspectives to Ellie again. She goes out to find Abby and does so eventually. Abby looks absolutely horrible and it seems like she went through the most traumatic experiences one can imagine. This might be an unpopular opinion again. To me, there always is a point as to how much you wish your greatest enemy to go through, and from what I gathered happened in that place, she got what she deserved. I'm just wondering why they put that group in there in the first place. When Ellie frees her, Abby just wants to go the fuck home. For once, I agree with Abby. I just want all of them to go home and I want this to end. But Ellie doesn't think so. She challenges Abby to a fight. The thing is that a little bit before that fight, Ellie got bit by a zombie. She is immune, but Abby isn't. Abby ends up biting off 2 of her fingers, so is Abby infected now? I would really want to believe that this is a clever open ending that they did, but with all the contrived plot points and the unbelievable writing, this feels more like an oversight than as a clever way to subvert expectations. The fight in itself lacked respect. Both of them were clearly very wounded and the fight itself was very brutal. But what quite frankly pissed me off was that Ellie saw a picture of a very bloody dead Joel that gave her strength. Yet when she was drowning Abby, she saw Joel playing the guitar all happy and that's what made her change her mind. A lot of people were angry that she did not kill Abby after all. I think that by now you might have guessed that I really don't care whether she lived or died. The part that I find to be absolutely insulting is the lack of respect given to the way Ellie would remember Joel. I am unable to believe that this entire time, this is the first time Ellie thinks about Joel as who he was when he was alive. When Ellie killed David, Joel stopped her when she kept on hitting his face long after he had died. This small moment to me had so much significance when it comes to how I looked at this game. I don't think Joel would have wanted Ellie to throw everything away that she had and that they had built together just for revenge. If anything, Joel wanted her to honor his life and what he had given her by making the best of it. The fact that this has never crossed her mind up until the point she could finally drow Abby is way more insulting than I could have ever imagined. It is not the act of not killing that pissed me off. We truly have come full circle. It is not that Abby stayed alive, it is how she stayed alive and why. By deciding to let Abby go, Ellie actually saved her life. I think that this irony was intended, but I can't be sure. Ellie returns home and she has lost everything. Dina has left and has taken JJ with her, and she has lost her fingers, so she can't play the guitar anymore. This is the one thing that kept her connected with Joel. Ellie ended up all alone. And to use her own words,
Being by myself. I'm scared of ending up alone.
never in my life did I expect to be so disappointed by the sequel of my all-time favorite game. In conclusion, they spat on Joel's character. Ellie ended up alone, and it did not seem like they expanded on Ellie's personality. In fact, it seems like her personality had been reduced. The tiny bits of Seattle that we got intrigued me, but we didn't get enough. And the world that had been built in the previous game seemed to be thrown out of the window, to be replaced by one-dimensional characters that were never compelling enough for me to care about. And to top it all off, the moral of the story is ambiguous at best. Good job, Neil Druckmann. I applaud you for subverting expectations. Never done before, and these choices always end up doing great. That being said, I want to end with a fun fact. Did you know that Druckmann's favorite book is written by David Benioff? Yes, that David Benioff.
And he kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
I guess we know where his inspiration came from. To summarize his entire experience,
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?